Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, been on the Nintendo 2 Sweet MTG, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host James. James, how are you feeling today? You well?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm excited to talk about your shiny new cube you've got.
It is, yes. Today we have a fun one. We have a new nice and shiny cube to talk about. Today we're going to be talking about a cube I built. I've called it the Treat Yourself Cube. Vague Parks and Rec reference there. I think it's something that me and my wife say to each other quite a lot whenever we're just trying to be a bit splashy. But that does kind of sum up this cube a little bit. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about the cube I built, how I kind of put it together, and kind of an overview of why it is cool and good. So the goal of this cube, the goal of the Treat Yourself Cube, is to go very big and very colorful. It's kind of like a meld between the Live the Dream Cube and the Chromatic Cube. The idea is that it's a tricolor cube. The archetypes go over multiple colors. So normal draft environments that you see, like standard sets, are generally 2-color sets, where kind of like each color pair has its own like signpost uncommon. Every now and then, like Khans, for example, or New Capenna, you'll get like a tricolor set where the archetypes go over 3 colors. And that's how this is built. Because I thought I wanted to build it that way because I thought it'd be a cool, interesting way of doing it. And also it kind of means that kind of like the best decks are either a full 3-color deck, or at a minimum they're 2 colors that want to be splashing either a 3rd color or maybe even a 4th color for a cool effect. Like in general, the curve of the cube is much higher than a normal cube, and the games in it are more battlecruisery and swingy. There is less aggro than a regular cube, but aggro is still doable, but you still have to be across 2 or 3 colors to kind of do it.
Yeah, I'd say from playing it a little bit, the games aren't like glacially slow. It's not like people aren't doing anything. You just do have a bit more time to set up. Like Signets, for example, feel very good here because they set you up to do a powerful play a turn earlier than you would normally be able to, because there's a lot of the juice really is at like 4 and 5 mana in this cube. And we say aggro isn't so much of a thing. Like, there are always aggressive decks because there is always a deck which is a little bit of a lower curve than the other decks. Aggro is a relative thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like a curve that would be the curve of a aggressive deck in this format might be the curve that looks more like a control or ramp deck in like a powered cube, but in this cube, it's going to play out as an aggressive deck because it's a little bit more low to the ground relative to the decks around it, even though it wouldn't be considered low to the ground in most cubes.
Yeah, exactly. Like the average CMC of like the Mitgo Vintage Cube, for example, it's probably going to be around like 2.5, just because there's so many cheap, efficient spells that get into those kind of cubes. The average CMC of this cube is 4. That means that on average, you're doing stuff really around turn 3 and 4. And kind of like yeah, that might sound like games take longer, but realistically, it's just more likely that you're kind of going, they're kind of like your turns start really kicking off. So like if both players are just going land go for 2 turns, that's quite quick. That's not like yes, games going to go to like turn 10 or 11, but the first couple of turns are quite quick to get through, which is still it's played pretty well. We've only had one hour round, but both players in it said that it was some of the best Magic they've played, so I will take that.
Yeah, that's something, I guess. But yeah, I think in general, the way you actually end up with really long games, right, isn't that the cards are more expensive, it's that the interaction is better than the threats. And I think that's not true here. Mm-hmm. Like, I think the threats are pretty good, and the interaction has moved higher up the mana curve along with the threats. It's not like we're here hanging out with Swords to Plowshares and Mana Drain against this pile of 4 and 5 drop mana threats, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That kind of brings us on to kind of like the inspiration for this cube. So kind of like, as I mentioned, it was kind of like the Live the Dream Cube that's been on Mitgo a bunch, and the Chromatic Cube. Kind of like when I was putting this together, I did, so it's like the archetypes are different from those kind of cubes, but the actual kind of like some of the bread and butter cards, I did look at those for inspirations, because like when you're building a powered cube, it's natural to look at the vintage cube as like the inspiration for like for your removal, for your burn, kind of like the general pieces that kind of go into it. For those kind of cubes, what I kind of saw from the interaction is that stuff like Swords to Plowshares, like Mana Leak would be so good in this cube, but they're just too efficient. Kind of like if you sword someone's 3-drop in a powered cube, that kind of feels good. But like in this, if you sword someone's 8-9-drop, which is going to be a lot more of their deck, that kind of mana swing is so unbelievably brutal. So kind of like all the like direct kill spells cost like there's no 2-mana Doomblades in this. All the Doomblades are like 3 or 4 mana. Like the counter spells are 3 or 4 mana, that kind of thing. It's kind of like everything's slightly slower in response to where you're playing your threats. And that was a big kind of like inspiration from the Chromatic Cube and the Dream Cube, because like those cubes have been around for a while. Like I'm not going to try and reinvent the wheel. They have done the game testing. Like it's a great thing to do if you're building a cube, is find cubes that have a similar sort of ethos to what you're trying to build and use them as inspiration for just the key bits, for like the overlappy bits that they'll kind of like help bring the cube together, basically, for the more staple bits, basically.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's an interesting comparison to those cubes. When I've played Chromatic Cube on Arena in the past, which admittedly was like a few years ago now, because the alchemy stuff kind of annoyed me, so I stopped playing it. But I found that to be a lot more sort of soupy than your cube feels. Your cube feels like it has, like, the archetypes are broad and you can sort of straddle 2 archetypes sometimes, but the archetypes very much do exist and are a thing that people will draft. Whereas often to me, Chromatic Cube felt like we were all just drafting like 3 to 5 color good stuff decks a lot of the time and making a lot of mana, and that was most of what was going on. Whereas your cube feels like they're pretty distinct, like synergistic archetypes you can gun for.
No, that's fair. So there are a couple of things from a design point of view that kind of, I think, kind of lean into what you said there. So like the fixing is pretty good. So in it we have fetches, ABR jewels, shocks, triomes, painlands. The whole thing's proxy, by the way. I should say that when I just casually throw out ABR jewels. But yeah, painlands, slow lands, surveil lands, and a full cycle of signets. But like, I specifically haven't given green that much fixing. Like, green can make either colorless mana or green mana. Like, I think one thing that like I've seen it in my normal cube of just like green X soup decks, where it's just kind of like you just play Birds of Paradise because it's generically good, and then that kind of one of the goals of this cube was to reward people for drafting their lands, and kind of like Birds of Paradise does kind of undo a lot of the work that drafting your lands does, if that makes sense, because it's kind of like, I'll just be in green, I'll draft the Birds of Paradise and a bunch of other stuff that makes any color of mana, and I don't need to draft any lands. Like I want people to like have to draft their lands in this cube to make their mana work. And also, if they do that, they get to splash for other cards, because like one of the things with the archetypes is, yeah, we mentioned that they're over 3 colors, but one of the things I did with the cube in designing was, like, there are archetypes across the whole cube. Like there are token synergies in some form over every color of the cube, and that really allowed crossovers, and kind of, it's definitely like a nice byproduct of that is it's really meant that kind of people have found archetypes and things to do in the cube that I did not plan or intend, and that's really cool. But it means that kind of like, if I'm like a Jundi deck, there might be a blue card that actually works really well in my deck, and there's like, okay, I want to play that, I just have to get a land to do it, and that's been quite nice. It's like the best decks I have seen in this cube are people who have drafted their lands so they can splash something cool or powerful that synergizes in some cool and interesting way, and that's been really fun to see as a designer anyway.
Yes, for sure. You want a cube which pays your players off for being creative, right? You don't just want to be like, you're this colors, therefore you draft this package of synergy. You want to give them room to make the synergies work across multiple colors, or find synergies with cards which weren't even there to be played alongside each other. I think that makes a cube way more fun to me when there is a bit more depth to it in that way.
Yeah, so kind of we will do a bit more of a breakdown of the archetypes and kind of the packages within it. But kind of like as we're doing this overview part first, I think it's worth mentioning kind of like, there are, like, in theory, like, well, there are 10 tricolor archetypes in the cube. But this is probably the most deepest I've gone on packages in any cube I built in terms of like cards I'm putting in to interact with each other. And one thing I really did with this is just kind of like try and find as many cards that overlap with things as possible. So like find like a two, like some of the interactions are just two cards working really powerfully together. But some are like, I went down this rabbit hole of like, okay, Devoted Druid. What does Devoted Druid combo with in this cube? Ooh, Devoted Druid does some cool stuff with Merkel, Lord of Bones. Cool. What does Merkel overlap with? It overlaps with Astral Dragon. Cool. All right. What does Astral Dragon overlap with? Cursed Mirror. Cool. And you kind of go down this. Yeah. Then we get to Flare of the Hatebound. We get to Luminous Broodmoth. We get to Unstoppable Slasher and Solemnity. This is all kind of like this rabbit hole of like card interact with this, which interacts with this, interacts with, and kind of like there's so much overlap, and there's so much like I have tried to list what I believe are all the combos in my queue, but I know I am nowhere near short because every time we play it, someone finds something new and cool to do, and that is really fun to see.
Yeah, for sure. It's honestly looking through the list before looking at others, I was like, why is there a Solemnity in here? None of that makes sense to me, but then actually makes a ton of sense. I had not seen that used as really a combo card in cube before. I'd only seen it used for like the prison-y stuff with 9 lives, but there's have a sack outlet and an undying creature and a Solemnity is pretty cool.
Yeah. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. Kind of like a couple of other bits just on the build and kind of general bit of the cube that I think to kind of go over is one of the other inspirations that I got from the Live the Dream and the Chromatic Cube is their use of split cards. Because like the first draft of this we did like the goal was for people to do stuff late game, but it was a bit swingy with people who were just who were consistently doing stuff on turns 2 and 3 and people who weren't. So what I've definitely found is by adding more split cards to it, even if the effect isn't super efficient, just having something so you can be more impactful in the game, even if it's just like mill some cards. For some decks, that's what they need to kind of get things going. Just adding more split cards. So direct split cards, like the ones from like Ravnica have been in, but also like I've also recently added a bunch of rooms because rooms are split cards and they are very good. And like just also because games are going longer, just having more things for people to spend their mana on is generally good. Kind of like mana sinks in general do get more important as you go into games that are going longer because they can be the things that kind of can break board stalls. Like a great example of a mana sink in this is Tyvar the Pummeler. It's like 1 green for a 3/3 that can actually be a combo card, but it also has an ability of 3 green. Creatures you control get plus X in turn, where X is the amount of greatest power among creatures you control. Like that is a great card to kind of like build towards, and then you can dump your mana into it and win the game. That's a great mana sink, but just having it be on split cards, like I can play Polluted Cistern on turn 2 and then Dim Oubliette on turn 5 to reanimate something. These are all kind of things that kind of like, just lets you use your mana in cool and interesting ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly true from a sort of player point of view, more than a cube designer point of view. If you look at the cube and you think, okay, the sort of cards which are going to win and lose games, the big threats coming down on turns 4 and 5, that doesn't mean you can neglect your early game. It means you still need to be casting cards on turn 2. You just want them to be cards that set you up to have a better turn 3, a better turn 4. So things like ramp, or you have 2 drops which do something on turn 2, but you know these games are going to go a bit longer. So the 2 drops which then also do something later, really premium, because you are just going to have a better time with this cube if you are doing something on turn 2. Like it doesn't have to be amazing. You're not going to find the sort of 2 drops you find in quicker cubes, but it's going to be night and day whether if you have like 4 or 5 2 drops versus if you only have 1 or 2, because you will just be a step ahead in terms of setting yourself up for those powerful turn 3 and 4 plays. And that doesn't just mean ramp, right? Like I think the signets are really good here, but that also means things like filtering, stuff like blue has a few like looters at the 2 mana slot. I think they're really good because we're looking to assemble like powerful like combos or like synergistic cards which work very well together. So just getting that bit of selection early can be really powerful. Or like red has the ones which make treasure, right? Like it's not ramping you in the same way as a signet, but it will let you get your 4 mana play out a turn ahead of schedule.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like green has a card like Satyr Wayfinder. You're not going to beat down an opponent with a Satyr Wayfinder, but it will start filling up the graveyard for those graveyard kind of decks, that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, that all makes sense. Yeah, just doing stuff in Magic is always important. Nice. Let's touch on a couple of personal bits, should we say? This is what I've got it listed down as, but kind of these are bits that kind of give it a bit more personality, basically. And also the first one, I think, might also be a reason why you don't end up with as much of a soup style of deck. And that's because everyone in this cube, when you draft it, starts with a Cogwork Librarian. If you've never played Conspiracy, I'm terribly sorry, because it's one of the best draft formats of all time. But a Cogwork Librarian, the easiest way of explaining it, I will read the card, but the easy way of playing it is if you played Sushi Go, it's Chopsticks. But Cogwork Librarian is 4 generic for a 3/3 artifact creature construct. You draft Cogwork Librarian face up. As you draft a card, you may draft an additional card from that booster pack. If you do, put Cogwork Librarian into that booster pack. What this basically means is, so you start with this just free, and at any point you can put it back in the pack, and you can take 2 cards from a pack. The Cogwork Librarians then go around the draft. People can draft them so that later in the draft, once you've used yours, you could pick up one that someone else has used. It also has the ability of, if you have 2 of them, you can take 3 cards from a pack because they do stack. That's quite fun. How have you found Cogwork Librarians to I have always had one Cogwork Librarian in my regular cube since I formed it. But how have you found James, everyone starting with the Cogwork Librarian to affect a cube draft?
Yeah, I think it's been interesting, actually. It's very powerful. Basically, the main effect it has on the draft as a whole, I think, is that more of the cards end up with the deck that can use them best. So if you're the graveyard deck, for example, and you see an excellent self-mill enabler and an excellent payoff, you don't have to choose between them. You can take both. And it means that that self-mill enabler, say in a normal draft, you'd be like, okay, well, I'll take this payoff. And then the Satyr Wayfinder goes to another green player who may or may not play it, like it's a fine card anyway, but they're not maximizing it in the way that you would be. And it means the particularly synergistic cards, which have greater value for one player than the others at the table, that player is more likely to end up with them because you don't end up with those horrible choices of which of these 2 cards that are absolutely crucial for my deck and won't wheel do I need to take. I will say you should have a pretty high bar as to where you're using them, and you should take them pretty highly out of packs. If you are taking like a solid playable card for your deck, but not sort of one you expect to be, say, one of the top 10 cards in your deck, and there's a Cogwork Librarian in the pack, you should probably take the Cogwork Librarian. Because the bar for that to be better, right, is just you see a pack in the future where the second best card for you is better than that card you would have taken. And that's, especially early on in the draft, that's probably going to happen. It certainly goes lower down in your pick order as the draft progresses. So it's
no one wants to be the one to end up with the Cogwork Librarian.
Exactly. But even like end of pack 2, right? Taking a Cogwork is less powerful than at the start an early pack 1 because you just have fewer chances to see that pack with multiple cards you really, really need. But early there, you should take them pretty highly.
Or I've definitely found that, the less cards in a pack, just being closer to getting a whole fresh new pack, that's when I personally take Cogwork Librarian slightly higher, if that makes sense. I found myself to be kind of quite liberal with them. I don't know if that's correct. I think we are definitely when we've done it, I've definitely seen kind of 2 trains of thoughts. I'm quite liberal unless as you said, there's something that kind of like you're not like if it's a playable or a Cogwork Librarian, then I'll take the Cogwork Librarian. I have seen what's the most you've had ready to go in one? I've definitely seen someone with 4 Cogwork Librarians going into pack 2 or 3.
Yeah, I don't think I ever got to 4. I think I had 3 at one point.
But like being able to take 4 cards from a pack, or 2 cards from a pack, then 2 cards from a pack, then 2 cards from a pack. But like that is very strong. That is a very good way of either one, getting like the powerful cards you need, or 2, getting your fixing. I personally will snap off in this cube like a Triome and a fetch land in pack 1. Like pack 1, pick 1, take Triome fetch with a Cogwork Librarian. I think that's perfectly solid in this cube, just because like it does just set you up quite nicely. Like fetches are so premium in this, and so are Triomes as well, just because of that ability to splash. Like your deck will be more powerful, and you'll be doing a cooler thing if you do have that ability to splash. So Cogworking for lands, I do think, is a solid shout as well.
Yes, yeah, I think it's very reasonable. I think it sort of depends where you're at in the packs, right? Like, if you're in pack 3 and there are 2 good lands for your deck, and you have multiple Cogworks, then I think by all means use one on the fixing. If it's like pack 1, I try not to,
really?
just because I expect there to be a pack with 2 really important cards for my deck, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm the artifact deck and I see a pack with, like, say, Chrome Hose Seed Shark and Psy Master Thopterist in it, I'm going to be mad I'm going to be a bit mad if I burned my Cogwork Librarian on a land.
But I've definitely found that, because you also have to announce when you are using the Cogwork Librarian, that like once the first person goes, person 2 and 3 are like, oh yeah, fine, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And then you start having them go around, and then like I think in the last time we did this, I think I Cogworked like 5 times. I never had more than like 1 in my pool, but I was able to pick one. I was able to pick them up relatively regularly, and like that will depend on playgroup. And like Cogwork Librarian, for what it's worth, is worth less than 30p. If you have a cube and you're looking to spice it up, just buy 8 of them and try it. I outside of this cube, I do think it is a cool thing to do every now and then, just to spice up. Like in general, in my cube, we do it when there's 10 people or 10 or more. Just because, or just for the reason that, like, yeah, combos should exist. Like, combos exist in like my regular cube, but you do have the thing of like 2 of the combo cards are in 1 pack, like, and therefore, and there's too many people for stuff to wheel. That's why we do it in larger cubes. But in this, the Cogwork Librarian fits the ideal of treat yourself, because if I see 2 cards I want, I should be able to take them. That is the ethos of the cube, and I think it kind of fits quite nicely there.
It's also, I found interesting drafting that sometimes there's a pack where if you could only take 1 card, you'd take this like Signet. But because I can take 2 cards potentially, I don't take the Signet at all. I take these 2 other cards that go really well together, right?
Yeah.
Like you can snap off a Dream Halls plus a Time Twister, say, and that like puts you into that archetype. It can be a way to sort of plant your flag, if you like. But they do. But then later on as well, they you don't want to be stuck with them right at the end, as we said, but they do sort of get more powerful once you know what you're drafting.
Exactly.
Because you will just see the packs where it's like, right, these are the 2 perfect cards that this deck specifically needs, and I probably won't wheel either of them. So that's a great time to use your Cogwork. Sort
of a transition. So there is technically a Cogwork Librarian beatdown deck available in this cube. And that's because there are some conspiracies in here as well, also from Conspiracy 1 and Conspiracy 2 Take the Crown. Conspiracies are also fantastic ways of making a cube unique and spicing it up. So there aren't really any. So Cogwork Librarians is the only card with the same name in it, but we do have a couple of cards like Brago's Favorite that it's a hidden agenda. So you start the game with it face down, and you have to name a card on it. So normally you like write on a bit of paper, slip it in, and then at any point you can turn it face up. And spells of the chosen name you cast cost 1 generic less to cast. This is kind of in here as kind of like a part of a package of like, oh, maybe someone can draft all the Cogwork Librarians and beat down with them, because in theory, like you can make these like 3 mana 4/4s, that kind of stuff that draw you another one. That could actually be quite fun. But I mean, James, my wife got a bit annoyed at you when you turn 1 Astrid Pest against her.
be honest, Dan, I got a bit annoyed at your wife when she lightning bolted my Asterisk Path. So
I did not hear that part of the story. I just heard James did this. I didn't hear that immediately. It was fine. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't get to attack her at once.
All right, fair. But
I was an unfounded complaint.
Fair.
It is the thing with those hidden agendas, right? That like they're here to do the cogwork thing, but they also just end up with someone, even if the cogwork thing doesn't happen, and you just name your most impactful creature to cast early. Or I think is there one that fixes colors for a specific card or whatever, which can be a really cool way to enable a splash.
Exactly. So unexpected potential is a conspiracy you can draft. Again, you hidden agenda, so you name a card before the game, and then you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast the spell with the chosen name. So you could fully you could take a 5-color card and just fully splash with this. Like again, it's for people to find something. I did not have any kind of particular interaction in mind with unexpected potential, but it's kind of in the name. The potential of this card is unexpected. I kind of want to see what people do with it and do some cool stuff with it. Like in my last cube, in my last deck, I had Summoner's Bond. So this has a double agenda, and with this, you start sideways face down, and you name 2 cards. With this one, whenever you cast a creature spell with one of the chosen names, you may search your library for a creature card with the other chosen name. So if there aren't really 2-card combos in here, but there are 3-card combos. So this can at least get you some key bits. But I had this, and I named where is it? Academy Rector. That's the 4-mana 1/2 that when it dies, you can go put any enchantment from your deck into play. I had that and Trumpeting Carnosaur, which has 2 and a red, discard it, deal 3 damage to any creature or planeswalker. So with that, if I cast Academy Rector, I go and tutor up Trumpeting Carnosaur, put it into my hand. I then use this ability to bolt the Academy Rector, and then I go and get Omniscience, and then I go off. That's a very cool thing to do in draft. That wasn't really why I put those in the queue, but that was cool.
Yeah, that's really sick. I think a lot of these conspiracies are really powerful as well, actually. I think you should be taking them pretty highly. Like, the one that fixes one spell, like, that's such a game changer. Imagine you're playing, like, the colorless artifact ramp deck, right? And I'm looking at what you're ramping into, and there's this chromatic orrery, there's a Nexus of Becoming, there's a Shimmel, which discovers in your end step. Like, those cards are all fine, but what if we cast a Cruel Ultimatum instead, you know? Yeah. Like, you can just, right, you get one card which is just completely color washed. That's kind of a nuts, I think.
I mean, Progenitus is in this as well. Just get to 10, man.
Yeah, if you can get to 10, that's certainly a thing you can do.
Some other things just on the fixing side of the conspiracy. So there are some I'm not running. I'm not running Power Play, because that's just target player gets to go first. That's a bit too strong. Like, that's Power Cube worthy. And there's another one which gives you a free hand of 7. You get a free mulligan. We're not running that one. That's also too strong. We are doing what I think are the fun ones. We have World Knit, which is conspiracy. Start the game with conspiracy face up in the command zone. As long as every card in your card pool started the game in your library or in the command zone, lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. That is treating yourself, as far as I'm concerned. Like, this is a card you want to see early. I have train rate to draft by taking this in pack 3, and then just starting drafting a load of multicolored cards, and then realizing I just made my deck way worse. But I enjoyed the draft. And it was fun. And there's a couple like this. There's also Sovereign's Realm, which is a similar type of thing. But you can do the every other card game mana thing of you can exile a card face down and then you get a land that taps for any color, that kind of thing. So there are some cool ways to do different things. And like these kind of conspiracies, they're not in here for a specific deck, but they are in here to kind of make things more interesting and kind of make unique decks when they appear. And that is another cool thing that I think this kind of cube can offer you, basically.
Yeah, for sure. I think Worldness especially seems kind of sick, actually, it's such a unique constraint it puts on you, right? It's kind of like drafting a Yorion deck plus even more, but
if you get the Yorion as well, James. Ooh.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, you really don't want to end up with a Cogwork Librarian at the end of a draft if you have a World Net.
Well, that's a 4-mana 3/3 you can play on curve. That might not be the worst thing that you're going to be playing in that deck.
Well, possibly. It sounds sweet if you take it early, though. I'm kind of down to try that at some point. I suspect it's really good, actually, but I'm not sure. I'm really low confidence in that. You'll have to come back to me once I've drafted it.
I think you would be really good with this because you are annoyingly really good at drafting your lands and playing like 3, 4, 5 color splashy things that kind of synergize really well together. I could see you taking this pack 1, pick 1 and doing something obscene, like some very powerful engine that really kind of pulls together. Because like, so with WorldKnit, you do still want to be drafting your lands. Like you take lands over a bad card because it still has to be in your deck. So like, or a bad card for your deck, if that makes sense. Like in theory, it's a cube. There's no actual bad cards, but there's filler cards. Like there's cards that don't synergize together, which is kind of where you're after. And also, like in the original Conspiracies, there was cards that removed cards from the draft, and I didn't put those in because those aren't fun. We're not treating yourself by removing cards from the cube. We want to be adding more cards. That's what Cogwork Librarian is for.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting where you draft lands with WorldKnit, right? Because the upside of drafting lands with WorldKnit is you get to make your deck a bit smaller.
Yes.
Because
yeah,
you have to play every spell you draft, right? And then the number of spells you play dictates the number of lands you have to play to keep the ratio of lands to spells sensible. So if you draft more lands, you get to play fewer spells and therefore play a smaller deck, which is what you want, right? Because you just want to draw the good cards more often. There's a reason why everyone plays the minimum number of cards you're allowed to play. You want to draw your good cards more often. WorldKnit puts this massive restriction on you, but you have to play all your cards. So you want to minimize the number of bad cards that end up in your deck or filler cards that end up in your deck, so you can draw your bangers more often, and you will have a lot of bangers because you get to play every color.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, it is really a cost. Like it's more of a cost than you might initially think, having to play every card in your pool. Because like I mean, for example, that like in Conspiracy, there was a card there was a conspiracy called Advantageous Proclamation, which was your minimum deck size is reduced by 5, and that was actually pretty strong. Because,
that sounds busted.
Yeah, like you're just playing a more efficient deck. Like this is one of the ones that kind of like empowered you that actually might be quite strong because it's just like less filler. You're just hitting your good stuff. Very strong card. All right, I think let's kind of do a bit of an archetype breakdown. We'll go over the archetypes and what they're trying to do, and then we'll pick out some cool interactions or some key cards that we think are worth talking about. Like some people will have played with before, so we might not touch on them too much, but like the ones that are a bit further out there, we will kind of go into a bit more detail. So the first one we're going to touch on is Esper, and it's vaguely artifacts. The idea is with this is that you are trying to make as many artifacts as possible and then profit from this. Like the signpost cards are things like, so there's a bunch of ways of making things like clues, food, treasure, doctors. You have Cyberdrive Awakener as a win condition. And then my kind of, we saw this at a Cube Clash in London end of last year, and I love it as a win con, and I just stole it. I thought it was great. Academy Manufacturer and Time Sieve. Basically, the goal is you just make so many tokens in a turn with Academy Manufacturer. That's the 3 generic. If you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create 1 of each. And Time Sieve, which is artifact, tap and sack 5 artifacts, take an extra turn after this one. There is a world where you can just be making so many artifacts that you just take a lot of turns and beat them down. This is Esper Artifacts has actually been very well represented and very strong. Just kind of like those are kind of the signpost cards, but just stuff like Nexus of Becoming, Transmutation Font. I've just been incredibly strong. I've like you drafted one of these decks, and you, James, like how have you found artifacts to be in this cube?
Yeah, I think it plays really well, actually. I think there are a few different builds. You can actually go kind of, I mean, aggressive is a strong word for this cube, but you can put quite a lot of power and toughness into play relatively quickly with, especially the stuff that makes constructs. So Thousand Moon Smithy is a card I was really impressed by. That's the 2 white legendary artifact where it enters, you make a slightly better construct to cancel your creatures as well. And then you can tap 5 tokens beginning of your main phase, flip it over, and then it becomes a land, which makes even more constructs. It's that was really powerful. And then just stuff like Psi, Master Thopterist, Chrome Host, Seed Shark, Forensic Gadgeteer. You can just assemble a tremendous number of artifacts. They're not all the most high impact, but there are loads of them. So then if you have any way to convert that into material to win the game, it plays really, really well. Also, really good home, actually, for a new card we reviewed on the last set review, the Stride Hanger Automaton. That's the 3 generic buffs all your Thopters. Whenever you create 1 or more artifact tokens, you get a Thopter as well. This deck's really good at making lots of artifact tokens.
Yeah, there was another new one that I really hadn't played too much before until it was a card I wanted to test out, and I've been unbelievably impressed by this. Securitron Squadron, you kicked my ass with this, James. Is 1 and a white for a 2/2 with Squad 3, which basically is you pay 3 generic and then or Squad 3 generic, which means as initial cost of cast a spell, you may pay 3 generic any number of times. Then this creature enters the battlefield, create that many tokens that are copies of it. The squadron has vigilance, and whenever a creature token enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on this on it. When we kind of reviewed this, I definitely didn't overly clock that it was every token from then onwards. Like this with like Psi, where all your Thopters get massive. Like because games are going longer in this, it's very like most of the times this is a 5-drop, so you're getting. Is it 5 power tokens on the board, and then every token afterwards will come in with 2 +1 counters on it? That is obscene. You can kill people so easily with that.
Yeah. You actually get 6 right away for if you squad it once, because the token sees itself because it is a token.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And gets buffed by the other one. So if you squad it once, you get a 2/2 and a 4/4, and then the next turn, when your Psi makes a Thopter, it's a 3/3 Thopter, right? It's huge, and you can also just run out on turn 2, right? And then if you have ways to make tokens in the future, they're all just going to come in with an extra counter. It's got that flexibility. If you ever get to squad it twice, the game's probably over. Really powerful card.
Yeah, that's been. I mean, I've only ever had it played against me, but dear God, that card's really good. Yeah. Artifacts in general, I think, is quite strong. That there is definitely a rebalancing probably coming where there's like more incidental ways of getting rid of artifacts, because Shatter's too good. There's probably like I could probably put a Cogler in or something like that. That might be like a 6 mana 8 that destroys artifacts. That might be where we're going. But yeah, very strong. Next up is Grixis. This is kind of like a control-y spells deck. So with this, you are using big spells to win the game. So kind of some signpost cards are like Kess Dissident Mage. That's the one in the Grixis 3/4. During your turns, you may cast an instant sorcery card from your graveyard. If a card would be cast this way, put it into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. There's just a bunch of big Grixis-y spells that you can kind of do. This does overlap with the Jeskai spells deck as well. But yeah, this has also just been very strong and good. Let me find some examples. But yeah, it's running things like kind of like big score and unexpected windfall. They're kind of progressing your game plan while also giving you treasure that you can then cash in to cast bigger and bigger spells. So I think James mentioned Cruel Ultimatum earlier. That's in here along with a bunch of other big things that you can be doing with it. I don't think we've had a dedicated Grixis deck yet, James, but like it's just in general, there's just a bunch of stuff that it can do. Like it's also quite good at playing your opponent's spells. So there's things like Siphon Insight in here. We've had things like Halo Forger to get some of your stuff back. I think it's a very good shell. I just don't think it's fully come together yet. Is that fair, James?
Yeah, I think the Jeskai and the Grixis spells decks certainly sort of bleed into each other quite a lot. I think you can. I think that's fine. I think you can straddle that curve. Partly because you get to make some treasure in this deck quite often, which helps a lot with your fixing. I guess in theory, the Grixis one is probably leaning a bit more into the interactive side of it, whereas the Jeskai one is maybe trying to cast one big spell or have one really big turn, which even if it doesn't end the game immediately, gets it a long way ahead. I think Grixis spells is good. It's good at recurring its spells. It's good at getting a lot of value. And has some nice finishes in there with stuff like Cruel Ultimatum. Yeah,
and actually, I guess with the treasure, it does make so there are extra turn spells in this cube, but these are actually they're quite higher. Like we're not running Time Walk. We're running like Temporal Trespass, and Beacon of Tomorrow is like 8 and... God, is that 11 mana for Temporal Trespass? Like those kind of spells. This is kind of...
It has Delve.
It does have Delve, that is true. That is Delve.
Yeah, no, but return stuff I think is good, because there's a lot of ways of copying your spells in this cube, which actually I think, I mean, I've not actually played a ton of them yet, but in my mind they should play out quite well, because there's...
things like Double Vision and Arcane Bombardment.
Yeah. And I think they pair well, because obviously your Dreamlight is copying one of the giant things, but also just stuff like Big Score plays really well with copies, because you don't pay the extra cost of discarding the card. On the second one, you're just going to draw a bunch of cards and make a lot of treasures, and that'll set you up really well for casting whatever you drew into.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Grixis is also one of the better colors to take advantage. Like, there is a sprinkling of like polymorph stuff in here. There is like Reality Scramble and a couple of other bits like that, where basically you can get rid of a dorky creature, and then because black does have like some all colors do have some big reanimation targets. Like you have Avatar. Avatar. Like we're talking like Astral Dragon, Avatar Row, Vein Ripper, Trumpeting Carnosaur, rather than necessarily like we're not Grizzle branding in this cube yet. We might, maybe in the future. Maybe in the future we could Grizzle Daddy. But like in theory, Grixis is good at taking advantage of that, because it does have like some 5 mana reanimation spells, which might be a good way of using those copy effects. So that can be pretty strong.
Yeah, sure. Avatar of Woe, I'm mostly psyched to put under Agatha's Soul Cauldron at some point.
Jesus.
That's going to be phenomenal.
Tap creature can't be... Yeah, very strong.
Yeah, tap destroy target creature. If it's under a Soul Cauldron, you don't worry about the... I've not even read the rest of this text, so I assume it's horrible. If there are 10 or more creature cards in total, yeah, it can't be blocked. Yeah, it costs 1 million mana. Just Soul Cauldron it or reanimate it.
Nice. All right, the next archetype is Jund tokens. So you're ramping into making big tokens and then turning them sideways or sacking them for value. So kind of like the signpost cards here are things like Corvold, Fakehurst King. We have things like Rampaging Baloths with a bit of landfall in here. We have things like Grave Titan. Grave Titan is still a great card. But also lower down the curve, you have things like Annex Hardened in the Forge. Like there is like kind of like, so because tokens is kind of over all of them, over all archetypes. Kind of the Naya ones, which we'll get onto in a minute, are more creaturey tokens, and then kind of black and blue, and a bit of white is more like artifacty tokens. Actually, and red. Sorry. Actually, you know what? It is a nice smorgasbord. Every color can make artifact tokens, and every color can make creature tokens, and kind of Jund is leaning more on the bigger side of tokens, like ramping into getting more bigger. Jund is doing Jund things, basically. You're putting some beef into play, you're killing some things, you are Junding them as you would expect to Jund them.
Yeah, one of the cards that really stands out to me in Jund actually is, I think this is a great cube for Corvold.
Yeah.
Because it's such a banger value-wise, right? It accumulates value so quickly. All the decks are capable of just putting a ton of pieces of cardboard into play. There's lots of treasure, there's loads of food, which is its own archetype we'll move on to later. But when I drafted the deck, I couldn't quite make mana work, but I really wanted to play the Corvold, because it's such a powerful way to convert those food or treasure or whatever it is you have into more cards. You play it, you get your card right away. You may have to kill it. There's not a ton of efficient removal on this cube, and Corvold Unanswered goes pretty mad, as people who played in its standard format can attest.
Corvold is like one of the best examples of this, of it is a card that other colors really want to splash and make it work. Like the white food deck, the white deck that's kind of running similar sack outlets want to splash this because it synergizes with like some of the food and artifact token stuff. But also like the aristocrat style of deck, like the Mardu aristocrat deck, also wants to kind of splash this because it's a really good sack outlet for the creatures as well. So like that's a signpost of like both like the Mardu deck and the Abzan deck want to splash this Jund card because it's powerful. That is a good signpost of kind of like some of the things that this cube is trying to do. Like there's overlap everywhere, and like you're rewarded for drafting your red splash in this by being able to play Corvold.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, let's move on next. Next up, we've touched on this a bit earlier, but Naya is go wide with tokens. So make as many small tokens as possible and go wide. This is the more sort of aggressive deck. You do have things like Sis, Slicer Goblin, That's the 1 red, 2/1 with raid, which is at the beginning of your end step. If you attack this turn, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. This is one of the decks where the Securitron Squadron is best. We haven't gone full Goblin Rabble Masters because that might be a bit too strong, but we do have like Anax, we have Squee Dubious Monarch. And kind of the payoff for this deck is sort of like is a card like Jetmir, Nexus of Rebels. That's 1 and a Naya for a 5/4 that has a lot of text. Actually, now I'm looking at it. Basically, if you have 3 or more creatures, things get +1/+0 and Vigilance. If you have 6 or more creatures, they also get +1/+0 and Trample. And if you have 9 or more creatures, everything will get +3/+0 and Double Strike as well as Trample and Vigilance. Like it's sort of an overrun, but it's an overrun you have to do a bit of work for. I think overrun might just be a bit free in this cube. I want people to have to work for and pay and be paid off, and you get to play this cool big kitty.
Yeah, Jetmir is really cool. It does a lot of powerful things. It's my issue with current design. Why is it a 5/4?
Yeah, I know. It is
a 2/2 with that on. You know, I want to have to make it good. I want it's already good. It's a 5/4 for 4.
Yeah. No, I do agree. Yeah. There's a ton of other like cool token makers in this. Like we're running Huntmaster of the Fells mainly because I like that card, that kind of stuff. There's just a ton of cool like cheap token makers, and also we haven't just gone. I haven't just gone for efficient. Like as I mentioned, Goblin Rabble Master a bit too good and efficient. Like we're running things like Doomed Artisan, like 2 and a white, 1/1 sculptures you control can't attack or block. At the beginning of your end step, create a colorless sculpture artifact creature token with this. Creature's power time is equal to the number of sculptures you control. Like that is an interesting card. It goes in an aristocrat deck, it goes in an artifact deck, and it can go in this kind of tokeny go wide deck. All you have to do is give it a couple of turns, kill the Doom Artisans, and you have a bunch of 4/4s or 5/5s. Like those things are a touch more interesting to me in this style of environment than Goblin Rabble Master or Rabble Master adjacent efficientness. Like originally, I think like literally in the signpost cards we had what's the big rabbit, James?
Jacked Rabbit,
yes.
Jacks of Rabbits.
Yeah, and I think that was a card that kind of you point out might just be just generically a bit too snowbally. Like it's a bit too much. I play A and I win the game. In this cube, I like at a minimum, I kind of want you have to do A, B, and C to win the game. But that is just I do A, and I'll allow A plus B to be good. A plus B plus C wins the game, but just A winning the game is too much.
Yes, for sure.
Next up, we have Bant, which is kind of a pretty classic Flicker style of strategy. So you have Rune, the Hidden Realm, is kind of like a signpost card. There's a bunch of Flicker stuff in here, and also just good ETBs. We mentioned Yorion earlier, and then you have cards like Bramble Sovereign, which is the 4-mana 4/4 in green. Whenever another non-turn creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 green if you do make a token of it. Finding like a good balance here was a bit tricky, so because like some of the very early, like more standard like ETB style stuff, I thought was just maybe a bit too not good, but just a bit too early. So I have added a couple of cool things here. So we do have like a few cards that are ETB draw a card, but we've also adding things like Combat Thresher. This is a 7-mana 3/3 with double strike that when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. But there's Prototype for 2 and a white, and this is quite interesting because you can play it for the Prototype. Comes in, draws a card. It's a 1/1 with double strike, and then if you flicker it with an effect, you now have a 3/3 double strike. You've done something. A plus B equals good. This is kind of where we are with this, and like I've definitely seen some people do some very cool things with. Well, there's a lot of very powerful ETBs in Magic now, James. Nowadays, James. And like, how have you found the flicker deck to be?
For sure, yeah. I've not played with or against it, I don't think really yet, but it looks very good to me. I think we have a good density of ETB creatures, partly because you don't have to really try to put a good density of ETB creatures in cubes generally. Like those are just a lot of the cards that are good. And I think a nice selection of flicker effects. Yorion looks great here. You're a lot of the time probably not meant to companion it, just put it in your deck. Mm-hmm. If you get there and you can companion it without having to play too many horrible cards, then that's fantastic. It'll be great for you. But I wouldn't play like way too many lands or a lot of cards that really don't work for your game plan. If you don't get to that, just put it in your deck. It'll be a really good 5-drop. I like as well, we've got the Flick Wisp to go with it because Flick Wisp is a comes back end of turn thing, not a comes back immediately thing. You can actually do a loop with Flicker Wisp and Yorion I say loop.
Oh,
It's
nice. Okay.
quite a slow loop,
Yeah,
but Yorion blinks out the Flick Wisp and all of your other ETB stuff. Flick Wisp comes back. Yorion goes away. You're in the next 10 seconds, and then comes back, flickers out Flick Wisp, and because there's that delay, they can keep flickering each other. And each time Yorion is also blinking everything, all your other ETB stuff, and you're gradually accruing value that way. And then at some point, regrettably, you have to stop because your opponent's dead. And that disrupts your fun to a certain extent. But yeah, it's a real shame. You're like, come back. No, you can't concede yet. But yeah, no, it looks sweet. It looks sweet. I like the Doom Dartisan as a cool include. It's also, I think, one of the homes for one of the most objectively powerful and potentially snowbally cards in the cube, which is Failure, Exuberant Shepherd.
That's fair. Failure is a very good card.
Yeah, that stood out to me reading through as one of the more snowbally things you can do, right? Because I always think when you approach a new cube that someone has built as a player, right? There's sort of two approaches you can have to it in my mind. You can try and sort of draft the cube as intended and try and go with the themes and build some decks the cube person might have been imagining and explore the interesting synergies. Or sometimes with cubes like this, and I think your cube is actually quite resistant to it, which is good, but you can call bullshit sometimes, right? You can say, okay, I get you're trying to get me to do this splashy multicolor stuff, but what if I just drafted all cheap creatures? And Failure is definitely possible to do that cheap curve out thing, which is very, very powerful. You play that into anything you flicker and you just run away with the game, right? And you don't need the long-term game plan. But I think there's enough in this cube that can stop that from happening, where I don't expect it to be a huge problem. But yeah, it stood out to me as this is objectively one of the most powerful, most efficient cards in the cube, and the Bant Flicker seems like the deck, which is really going to use it very well.
No, 100%. And also worth mentioning with the Flicker decks, we are trying to treat ourselves here. So obviously we do also have things like Elish Norn and Panharmonicon, which will double up your ETBs. There's enough time in this cube to play a Panharmonicon, I think. Bant's been a lot of fun. Yeah, Bant was involved in the 1 hour round one.
Yeah,
that was one of the decks. I'm assuming it was gaining life somehow. How they didn't mill out? Oh, was it a Yorion pile? Was that how they wasn't milling out?
It might have been. Yeah, it takes a long time to mill the Yorion deck.
Nice. The next deck, I'm actually going to throw to you, James, if that's all right, because this is one normally when I'm good, normally when I'm adding a cube archetype, I have a pretty good idea of how it plays and what it's doing. This one, I will be honest with you, was very much a vibe of, I'm going to put these cards in. I think they work together. I've seen people do stuff with them, but I've never played it myself. And that's the Abzan archetype, and it's Food Fight. The idea here is play a bunch of things that make food, eat the food, get value out of the food, and gain some life. James, you want to talk about how you found the food deck to play? Because the first time we drafted this, you came away with a pretty strong food archetype here.
Yeah, I think this plays really well. I think this is the right power level of cube for it, pretty much exactly. So if you listen to, we did an episode back in the day on food as an archetype, and I think this is the sort of cube where it really works. It is so good at generating. You can generate so many foods so quickly in this deck.
It's kind of
so for example, Samwise Gamgee, I think, is probably the most premium card for this deck if you're committing to the food thing. This is a green or white whenever another 2/2, whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a food, and then you can sack 3 foods, return a historic card from your graveyard to your hand. So many of your creatures are legendary that is almost return a creature, and the amount of food you get really, really fast is very, very powerful with this. It means if you're doing anything with that food, you're going to run away with the game pretty quickly. I like the partner hobbits as well.
Yes, they're cool in this. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a nice little sort of mission in the draft, right? to assemble your partners. And because a lot of the partners have a strong half and a weak half as well, right? So it's figure out when you can float the weak half around the table.
The best part about Merry Warden of Isengard is that it gets Pippin Warden of Isengard.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Peregrine's job is entirely to go and find Pippin. And the Sam and Frodo is good because Sam is really strong, actually. Sam just pops out of food every turn, and then your food's crack for one less. There's some good, generic ways to use artifact tokens as well in the cube, which function really well in this deck. So the Thopter guy we spoke about earlier, I think this is a fantastic home for it because you're generating a huge amount of food, and it's mostly lots of single triggers that make one food, right? So it doesn't care that it's one or more. You have 5 triggers that make a food. You don't have one trigger that creates 5 foods. So you get a lot of Thopters off of that. Jaheira is also really nice here. Jaheira, Friend of the Forest. This is 2 and a green for a 2/3 legend. Tokens you control have tap to add a green. This is so much mana in this deck. Even if you have nothing else to do with it, you can use mana from some of your foods to crack the other foods. It makes this deck incredibly hard to kill with damage because of the amount of foods you're pumping out. And you have some payoffs for that life gain stuff, like Sorin, the 2 mana black Sorin, where you can flip it and then the other side nug someone equal to the amount of life you gained this turn. That's a very powerful win condition in this deck. You'll often run it out, crack a bunch of food, just kill them that same turn in the late game.
Yeah, I'm so happy this archetype is coming together. It's also, because a lot of the hobbits and a lot of these cards are actually quite cheap, it's sort of the aggro deck as well. It is one of the decks that can do things it's a deck that you are rewarded by drafting this deck, basically. You are rewarded by actually having one of the more synergistic decks that actually can really just start doing its thing earlier than some of the other decks. And when I played, I think I played the first time we did this, you had kind of a very good version of this. And then I think the last time, it wasn't the full food fight deck, but it was food adjacent deck. Just doing, again, food is an artifact. Food just synergizes with so much that this cube is trying to do. And I was prepared and ready to just make Abzan +1/+1 counters. I had it in my head, okay, we'll do food a couple of times, no one will draft it, and then we'll make it +1/+1 counters or something like that. Something a bit more generic. But food's really found a place, and I'm so glad of that. I am very happy that food fight is alive and well in this cube.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's I think the thing's more than a lot of the other decks, there are a chunk of cards in here which probably only you want.
Yes. So
you do get them late, and you can often take a more generically powerful card and float the random hobbit around the table. It will come back to you. The other card, actually, which when I drafted the food deck, I think I passed it for some removal spell or something and really regretted it, was Feasting Hobbit. This is 1 a green for a 2/2 halfling, has Devour Food free. So as it enters, you may sacrifice any number of food and then put 3 times that many counters on it, and can't be blocked by creatures with power less than Feasting Hobbits can't block it. I think this card is probably insane in the food deck, actually. I had underestimated just how many food I would have. I think if I drafted this, you wouldn't play it early, right? You play it on turn 5, and I think it's going to be a 12/12 or 15/15 or something a lot of time, and they're just never going to be able to block it. If they don't have a hard removal spell right now, they die.
Yeah, that's going to be huge, actually. Yeah, awesome. Sick. Phenomenal. All right, let's keep the ball rolling. The next one is Jeskai, and this is kind of dovetails into the Grixis one by being big spells. So this is also wanting to double up your spells with things like double vision. But this is kind of, I guess, more where the Dream Halls and Omniscience come into it, because you do have access to Academy Rector as a way of cheating those big things into play. We kind of touched on this deck when we were talking about Grixis, but just some other kind of cards to mention here is this is also where things like Scholar of the Lost Trove can come in. That's one that Similarly to Torrential Gearhulk, it can come in and it can cast an instant sorcery or artifact card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. The 7 mana 5/5 flyer, but just again, just ways of cheating big instant and sorceries, casting them basically. So we also have like a Mizzix Mastery that can either go into the Grixis deck or go into this deck. It's just doing big cool things with big expensive spells. And like I think the last time we played, James, the Sublime Epiphany you cast against me, like in regular cube, it's kind of backbreaking, but in this cube where you're really putting mana into where you can be up on mana with the Sublime Epiphany, that is so backbreaking.
Yeah, that card's kind of disgusting when you get to put off. Obviously, it's like a 6 mana instant. If you're behind, sometimes it's not great, but yeah, when it works, it's one of the best cards in the cube, I think. I quite like this big spells deck. I think it can do a lot of really good, like, go over the top stuff. And I think the big spell stuff is a lot more fluid than when we're talking about the food deck. We're like, okay, well, this is going to be like mostly an Abzan deck most of the time. I think the big spell stuff really bleeds into different archetypes very well, which I think is really interesting. And you definitely want some synergies like that. I certainly died very badly last time we played this to I think it was sort of 4-color maybe, big spellsy stuff, but Scholar did so much work. And like it was one of those games where I kind of felt like I just was so head on board, I didn't really feel like a lot could go wrong. And I could even maybe had a counter up and opponent cast the reanimate spell with demonstrate. So there were 2 copies on it on the stack. They got back a Scholar. Scholar took another turn. And I went from like, I really think I'm very likely to lose this game to they took like 4 turns and I died. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, I needed to be trying to end this game quicker than I was because I didn't realize that there was this end game that I couldn't deal with, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the Jeskai version maybe gets a bit more use out of wheel effects as well. So there is just there's Time Spiral. There is Time Twister in here. I don't consider this a powered cube, but there is Time Twister in here. It's not really power. It's a proxy as well. Don't worry. And also things like Wheel of Fortune. These are in just because they are cool. There isn't there is no dedicated wheel deck in this. Like there's no Shield Druid or anything like that. But just these are cards that kind of allow cool and splashy gameplay, and so that's why they're in the queue. But I think this deck, like basically specifically the deck doing Dream Hall's Omniscience, really gets a lot out of the draw 7s. Basically, really like those. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, yeah, Dream Halls especially goes so well with the wheels, and I think there's also an interesting component here with Wheel of Fortune specifically with the copy effects. You can deck your opponent with Wheel of Fortune pretty effectively, and they only start with 40 cards. If they mill themselves a bit, and because it doesn't exile itself as well, right? You can get it back. I think that's maybe an avenue you could go down. But yeah, I think the wheels are cool here. Like they look like sort of more powerful cards than what is in the rest of the cube, right? Because we associate them with the busted things you can do in Powered Cube. But none of the rest of the busted stuff is here. So you have to kind of do something else and figure out another powerful thing to do with wheels than the things we're used to, right? Like there's no Orcish Bowmaster stuff, obviously, but there's also, you don't have the fast mana to really get ahead of a game. So yeah, finding a way to break the symmetry on wheels, I think is a good puzzle for this cube.
I personally quite enjoyed them, and exactly. Finding something to do with the cards is one of the main MOs of the cube. Let's keep it rolling. Next up, we have we have 3 archetypes left, and then we'll get onto some cool packages. Next up, we have Sultai, and to the surprise of no one, this is like a graveyard shenanigan-y deck. So this one has actually changed a little bit from my initial inception of this. Effectively, what it's kind of become is the Insidious Roots deck. I'll read Insidious Roots for those unaware. It's a black and a green for an enchantment that says creature tokens you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color. Very good in this cube as there's a lot of creature tokens. Then also has the ability, whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 0/1 green plant creature token, then put up some counter on each plant you control. We've actually seen a couple cards like this, and effectively what this deck is trying to do is move cards into the graveyard, profit, move cards out of the graveyard, profit, move them back again, move them around, graveyard into play. There's things like Sidisi for some milling, there's Kesage Cage Breakers for making a big board state. There are other versions of Insidious Roots, like Skeleton Crew is just coming in, but you also have things like Sir Conrad the Grim, a great card that rewards you for milling or for moving cards between zones, that kind of stuff. We have things like Tortured Existence, so you can really get a very powerful little engine going on with this. This is definitely one I've in more recent updates I've tried to focus to actually kind of make the deck be a thing. And yeah, I'm happy with where this is going. It also has the nice, cool little alt win condition, sort of in quotation marks, of Out of the Tombs. This is one me and James were discussing beforehand. It's 2 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put 2 Eon counters on Out of the Tombs, then mill cards equal to the number of Eon counters on it. If you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, instead return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If you can't, you lose the game. This is currently as close as we're getting to Thassa's Oracle. We might toy around with this a little bit more with some of the other effects that can win you the game if you mill yourself. But this is just like a nice little... This is a reward for doing all that hard milling and will stop you if you mill a little bit too greedily. This is definitely one that I have toyed around with. Basically, I'm being a bit more direct with it. Previously, it was just kind of generally just a bit more just mill and come up with something. But now, like, we're adding the Sir Conrad, we're adding the things that reward you when you move around, and we're also adding Hogak as just okay, cool. Worst case, we'll kill them with the Gak.
Yeah, for sure. And Hogak, I kind of always want to be busted in Cube, because and we've spoken about before, like when wizards make design mistakes, it's often really good for us as Cube players, because they're really fun in Cube. I think you see that with Nardu in more powerful cubes. Nardu's certainly too good for this cube. That I think Hogak is something that would be very fun to explore in this sort of cube. I've tried it in powered cube before. It's quite hard to get it to work, but I think it could be really sweet here.
I think in this specifically, where you're making a bunch of tokens, so you can convoke it, and you're filling your graveyard. Like the complaints of this deck up to this point have not been. People haven't had issues milling themselves. They haven't had the payoffs they felt have been enough of a reward. And I feel Hogak really does fill that hole. But also, if you're killing them with Sir Conrad while you're doing it, I think that's also a pretty nice, solid way of doing it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the huge thing with Hogak over a lot of the other payoffs, right, is you don't need to draw it. It's the classic issue with graveyard decks when you mill all the payoffs, right?
Yes.
And Hogak gets around that.
Yeah. Dread Return also coming in with the next update. So by the time you're seeing this, as long as the cards have arrived, which I think they have, Dread Return, all these updates that we're talking about should be in as well. All right, let's keep it rolling. The next one, I'm not going to spend too long on because Mardu is aristocrats. Most people know the goal of an aristocrat. The main difference between this cube and others is that the curve is a bit higher. So again, like our Blood Artist effects are things like Sir Conrad, as I mentioned, and also Sanguinary Priest. That's the 4-mana 2/4 Astartes cleric with lifelink. And whenever another creature you control dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. So that's our Blood Artist. 2 mana for Blood Artist, probably a bit too good in this type of cube, but that's where we're going with it. There's also a bunch of Boris makes tokens, Orzhov has some drain effects, that kind of stuff. In the very initial draft of this cube, this was a bit too aggressive. All of its gold cards were 2 mana, and it meant people were just curving out a bit too aggressively. So we pushed up a little bit. We have things like Butcher of the Horde, which I like. Butcher of the Horde is such a good card in this cube. It is great. I'm glad it's doing work. And but like I brought in things like Elenda the Dusk Rose as kind of like a cool payoff for the Aristocrat deck, but not like a 2 mana thing that kind of can just really kill them really quickly. So that's kind of been pretty solid. Teamer James, I really like this deck. I sort of had a version of it last time. It's Teamer, cheat things into play. So you're going to ramp and you're going to get the biggest things into play as possible and kill your opponent with it. So you do have things like Pattern of Rebirth. You have effects like Song of Creation, which lets you play an extra land each turn. when you cast a spell, you draw 2 cards, and then at the end of it, beginning of instant, you discard your hand. And then cards like bigger on the inside, kind of you're ramping into things like Maelstrom Wanderer, that kind of thing. You're just putting a bunch of beef into play, getting as much as possible. It's a very bread and butter archetype, but in a deck, in a cube like this, where we have where the goal is to go long, I feel we did need a deck that could go bigger than the rest of them. So you have things like Giant Adderphaged, Rampaging Buzz, as we mentioned. You have things like Trumpeting Carnosaur, like Astral Dragon. These are just some of the big things that you can get with it. We have like Pyrewood Gearhulk, Quartzwood Crasher, just big things basically for you to get into play and kill your opponent with.
Yeah, this looks really cool. I like Monster Manual. I like the Ilhargra Raised Boar.
Yes, Big Pig.
Yeah, the Reality Scramble, sick. The it's like a polymorph with retrace. I would honestly love to see like another polymorph or two, because I think if you get multiples, you can commit a bit more to the idea of I'm going to try and not have many cheap creatures in my deck and have like ways to make creature tokens, which definitely exist in this cube, and try and polymorph and be very likely to hit a big thing. So I think right now we've got like Fireflux Squad and Reality Scramble, right?
Indomitable Creativity, sort of. The mana on that's a bit harsh.
Mana on that is tough, yeah.
There is Calamity Galloping Inferno, but that is a 6 mana spell, same as Mirage. So yeah, maybe a cheaper one. I could see maybe like actual polymorph.
Yeah, classic of the genre.
Yeah, like an actual like 3 or 4 mana one. Yeah, I could see that doing some work in here. Nice. Yeah. This one is very fun, and it's very easy for people to kind of get their head around of just like, okay, ramp a bit, see something in, kill. Marvelous. Love that.
Yeah,
I do think
sure.
you need that element.
Yeah. I'm also 100% kill myself with Song of Creation at some point if we play this cube a few more times. That card's sick. I always just run out of cards and die, but it's good fun.
That's why in your Teamer deck you're splashing black for Out of the Tombs.
Got him.
Nailed it. All right, cool. So those are kind of the overview, like the over archetypes. But we are not stopping there. There is a bunch of packages in this cube that, this is kind of like one of the main. As I said earlier, it's kind of one of the main things I've kind of really tried to make this kind of overlap work. So there's just a bunch of stuff that works really well with each other. There will be a link to the cube if you want to check this out in a bit more detail. But kind of like, James, I think if we're just going to go through and pick out some of the ones that kind of we like the most, kind of like one I wanted to touch on, because it's one that kind of it's one I took from Modern, but Madcap Experiment and Platinum Imperium as like a nice little 2-card interaction. So Madcap Experiment is 3 and a red for sorcery. Reveal cards on the top of your library until you reveal an artifact card. Put the card onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Madcap Experiment deals damage to you equal to the number of cards revealed this way. Platinum Imperium is a 8 mana 8/8 that says your life total can't change. So if this is the only artifact in your deck, if you cast Madcap Experiment, you cheat into play an 8/8. That's pretty cool. There are like you can just, I don't know, be a hero and run Madcap Experiment in a deck with some other artifacts and see how that goes. But like, yeah, that's a nice, cool little thing that kind of like if you see it and you can build around it. And also with the Cogwork Librarians, it is something that you're more likely to be able to kind of get, just because even if they're not in the same pack, it just means that you can take the Madcap Experiment and a land as well if you already have the Platinum Imperium. It kind of makes drafting a little bit easier there, basically.
Yeah, sure. That one looks really sweet. I really like the look of the Solemnity stuff as well. So Solemnity's 2 and a white enchantment. Players can't get counters. Counters can't be put on artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or lands. So if you combine this with a creature with Undying, say, which are a couple of, or Unstoppable Slasher is a nice one. That's one where amongst other things, when it dies, if it had no counters on it, return it to the battlefield tapped with 2 stun counters on it. And then any sack outlet, you can then just trigger as many times as you want. So if you have something like an Altar of Dementia or Goblin Bombardment, you can just kill them with that. That seems cool and kind of powerful, and I'm down to try it.
Yeah. As I mentioned, that is very much like, I've listed a bunch of these interactions on the website, on the Cube Cobra overview, but there is a lot more than I probably initially thought of. Yeah, Solemnity is a cool card. It does a lot of cool and broken things. One thing we didn't touch on when we talked about the food deck is there is actually a bunch of food-based combos in here, which is kind of another thing of like, oh, this aggro deck also has a combo win, which kind of is kind of cool and fun. But like, a lot of the combos revolve around the card Experimental Confectioneer. So that's 2 and a black for a 2/3 human peasant. When it enters the battlefield, create a food token. Whenever you sacrifice a food, create a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature can't block. So this kind of goes infinite with any kind of card that says if you would create a token, make a food, like Peregrine Took does that. And then it also combos with things like Woe Strider and Yigra, because Yigra turns everything that you make or everything you have into a food. So kind of the rat is a food token you've made. You can sack it and keep going round and round and round. There's a lot of cool stuff with Experimental Confectioneer, which is a card that only the food deck wants. So you're likely to pick it up. So yeah, as well as being aggressive, you can combo them out, which is quite funny.
Yeah. I think the thing I like about these combos as well, by the way, is that we're not running any bad cards to enable them. So
Yes.
you're not really giving up anything. So sure, it's not going to like come together every draft, but some percentage of the time when you're drafting food deck, you'll see an Experimental Confectioneer, and then probably you look at your deck and you have something that combos with it, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, similar with another card that I think we touched on maybe earlier, but a Devoted Druid. There's a bunch of Devoted Druid combos in here, like Devoted Druid, Merkel, Lord of Bones, Devoted Druid, and Hazel's Brewmaster. Devoted Druid, Tyvar Pummeler, and I think a creature with 5 power is also infinite. I think that's how that one works. But just having like Devoted Druid is a cool card. Just having ways that people can make infinite mana. Like again, like if treating yourself a little bit of infinite mana, I think that's fine. I think we're good with that. Another one, like the first package I added to this, which I should actually touch on. There's Polyraptor combos in here. I love Polyraptor. This is like my excuse to play with this. So Polyraptor is a 8-drop, 8 mana 5/5. When it's dealt damage with a token, there's a copy of it. But you also have cards like Terror of the Peaks in here. We have Warstorm Surge. We have Agate Instigator. These are all things that effectively kind of can deal damage to someone or something when they come in. So if you have a way, basically these combos revolve around Polyraptor comes in and effect. You have 2 effects that deal damage when something comes into a target. One of them deals it to the Polyraptor. One of them deals it to your opponent. It just you're making infinite Polyraptors at that point, and you're infinitely pinging out your opponent. Yeah, this is fun. I've been killed with this, and I did not care because well done, my opponent. I love it. Yeah, Polyraptor is a sweet dorky card that I think is just perfect for this kind of environment. Another card I want to mention that isn't really a package, but it's a kind of a package by itself, is Displaced Dinosaurs. This is a card I think can do some really broken things. It's a 7 mana 7/7. As a historic permanent enters the battlefield under your control, it becomes a 7/7 dinosaur in addition to its other types. So this is sort of a payoff for the food deck. If you cheat this into play, your food becomes 7/7s.
Kind of powerful, yeah.
Yeah. Or like your Thopters will become 7/7s with flying. Like, pretty good. I think, Displaced Dinosaurs is kind of it's a 1-card package because so much of the cube is artifacts just naturally because of artifacts being such a strong archetype in the cube. So that's another fun little thing to add there.
I think this is a good illustration of the approach, right? Of yes, there are good ways to cheat stuff into play, but once the thing is in play, it's not gonna just do it on its own, right?
Exactly.
You don't get an Archon of Cruelty, you get a Displaced Dinosaurs, and then you've got to find a way to make some 7/7s. I think that's cool.
Exactly. Like I want people to be doing the thing and having an awesome time, but kind of like the game. I don't want the game to just end. Like draw out that you enjoying yourself, draw out your opponent enjoying yourself. Like there is some cool stuff you can do with it. Like the big spells don't like. The big spells are very strong and powerful. Like Vein Ripper's in here, and Vein Ripper did a ton of like Vein Ripper combined with the Eternal Wanderer, like just KO'd me out of nowhere. Like one game because the Eternal Wanderer is a sacrifice board wipe. With Vein Ripper, it's just like, oh, okay, I lost 18 in one turn. I lose.
That sounds powerful, yeah.
Very strong. Actually, very strong, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of very interesting packages in here. With the Druid stuff, I think this is another great home for unexpected potential. The a conspiracy that color fixes one of your cards? Because often one of the
that's a
issues
good
with
shout.
Druid,
Yeah.
right, is I have infinite green mana, now how do I win the game? And there's not always a ton of ways to do that. But when you can Druid out your Progenitus, like that kind of does the business.
Yeah. I mean, I could see a world where I might need more infinite mana sinks. Like currently, it's Pest Infestation and Genesis Wave. Genesis Wave is a vibe with infinite mana. You put your whole deck into play, and I assume you win the game at that point. But
I mean, if you don't, it's on
that's
you.
on you.
I would suggest.
It's not on me as the cube designer. That is on you as the builder. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a bunch more different packages in here, including the Cogwork Librarian Beatdown deck, which, if you want to check out, the link to the cube obviously will be down in the description below. There's a bunch of other kind of cool packages and like cool things that you can do in this cube. That if you're looking for inspiration for your own cubes, 100% recommend checking it out. I think that there's a lot of cool stuff in here. But I think let's round things off today with some pack one pick ones. Remember that we do have a Cogwork Librarian, so we could be doubling up. Let's go through this first pack. So we have Urza Lord Protector. That's the Meldy Urza that makes your instant sorcery cheaper. We have Final Showdown, which is the spree card that can be a 6 mana board wipe. We have Sundown Pass, which is the Boris slow tap land. We have Pippin, that is a food card. We have Shimmer Dragon, that is a big dragon card drawy spell. We have Brago, which is very good in Flicker. Prismatic Lens, which is a cheap artifact that can do a bit of fixing. We have Orzo Signet for some ramp. We have Tough Cookie, which is a cheap food creature that can animate another artifact. We have a Fearmancer, which is a great blocker and great in the Aristocrat deck. We have Squee, Dubious Monarch, which is a Rebel Master variant. We have Savannah, which is the white-green dual land. We have Nexus of Becoming, which is a very broken card I might actually need to read. At the beginning of a combat on your turn, draw a card. Then you may exile an artifact or creature card from your hand. If you do, create a token that's a copy of the exiled card. It's just a 3/3 golem artifact creature in addition to its other types. Had to read that because I don't always remember what that card does. We have Fireflux Squad, which is a polymorph style of card on a creature. And we have Flay of the Hatebound, which is a creature that deals damage when a creature enters from our graveyard to a creature or a player. And it also has Undying, so you have the Undying combo aspect with it as well. I don't think we're cogworking with this pack, but if we were, I think I have 2 cards I could be tempted to take. What are you feeling from this pack, James?
So there's a couple of cards that stand out to me. From the sort of stay open, play quite safe, I really like Prismatic Lens. I think just the 2 mana acceleration is very, very good in this format, as we discussed. And this is going to be good in basically any deck I could draft. Outside of that, I think to me, Nexus of Becoming is like the most exciting card here.
It's highest upside of just like you can really artifact or creature, like a 3/3 Grave Titan is still pretty good. A 3/3. I mean, there's plenty of other big dumb artifacts in this that it doesn't matter if they're a 3/3 or not. It just you want the ETB or the ability of the artifact.
Exactly, and it's drawing you a card every turn. But yeah, I think there's just enough good big stuff to cheat in here. And 6 mana is very attainable. I'd be pretty tempted by that as a first pick. Also, even works with the like token synergy stuff, right? The stuff that you put in is a token.
Ooh, yeah, this with a token doubler. There is like Primal Vigor in here.
Oh yeah, that's kind of great.
That's pretty good. How do you feel if you were going to cogwork? How would you feel about Urza and Nexus of Becoming? Really planting your flag in that artifact deck, or if you're going to do that, is it Prismatic Lens, Nexus of Becoming, and?
I think I would probably be on Lens plus Nexus. I guess you could also go Nexus plus Fireflux Squad as a way to double down on like having massive creatures to put in.
I'm just really focusing on cheating stuff into play. That could be quite cool. Nice. Okay, I like that. My gut is that we're not cogworking this pack, but I think I'm on Nexus of Becoming. I think that's a pretty solid shout. Next up, we have Mana Confluence, which is a 5-color land. We have Charismatic Conqueror. It's the 2 mana 2/2 that taxes your opponent's creatures when they come in. Otherwise, you make vampires. We have Basim Ibn Shak, which is kind of like a more cracked Baleful Strix. We have Gruul Signet, which is the Gruul Signet. We have the Mice Stone and the Meek Stone, which is the other half of the Urza flip card. We have the Meat Hut Massacre 2, which is a bigger Meat Hut Massacre that is about stuff dying. We have Overgrown Tomb, which is the Golgari Shock. We have Primal Vigor, which doubles up all tokens and all plus one counters that are put on stuff. That is your opponent's as well. It is symmetrical, so there is a bit of a downside with that, but it has the potential to be very strong. We have Wake the Dragon, which is a sorcery that makes a 6/6 dragon with Flying Menace and has flashback. We have Bazaar of Baghdad, which I love as a magic card. We have Crystalline Crawler, which is 4 generic for a 1/1 with Converge, and it enters the battlefield with a number of colors spent to cast it, and you can remove a counter from it to make a mana of any color, and then you can tap it to put a counter on it. It's a slow, big mana dork. We have Unstoppable Slasher, which is it's sort of the combo card, but it also, if it deals combat damage to a player, they lose half their life. We have Electro Dominance, which is a cool card for the instant sorcery payoff deck. It deals X damage to any target, and you may cast a card with converted mana cost X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Oh, actually, infinite mana combo. We love that. We have Malevolent Rumble, which is the 1 and a green kind of, which is like a mulch effect, but you get an 0/1 Eldrazi. And we have Flayer of the Hatebound, which did we have that in the last pack? We had that in the last pack.
Yeah, I think so. That's fine.
The cube loves Flayer of the Hatebound. What are you feeling from this pack, James? I think I know what I'm taking, but I think I'm wrong. What are you taking, James?
I mean, the question of what I think you should take and what would I take are quite different here. Mm-hmm. What I think you should take, I think Basim is very powerful, but obviously it's 2 colors. But you just get to draw cards and hit them when you play artifacts. Basically, that seems quite powerful. Gruul Signet, excellent choice, as we've discussed before. Malevolent Rumble is really like the best of this sort of effect. It ramps you from 2 to 4 and gets any permanent and the rest go in the graveyard. I think that's really, really powerful in the graveyard deck. Unstoppable Slasher, we talked about as a combo card. It's also just a really good card. It's a 3 mana 2/3 Death Touch. When it dies, it comes back, and when it hits them, they lose half their life. That's just going to be a strong card in any black deck, basically. I would probably just take Bazaar of Baghdad and accept I probably wasn't winning this draft, but I'd have a lot of fun.
Yes.
I want to draft a Squee. I want to draft a Master of Death. I want to draft an Insidious Roots. You could even talk me into cogworking here for Bazaar plus Rumble, because I think those very much want to go in the same deck.
Bazaar is the card I want to take. Again, there are dredges in this. We didn't mention that when we're doing the graveyard deck, but there are dredges in here. Like, you will be putting a lot of stuff into your bin.
Exactly. And when I said except I'm not saying I don't think Bazaar's a powerful card in this cube. Like, I think you could take Bazaar and do really well and get a great deck. I'd be fairly confident in saying, like, if your only goal is to maximize your win rate, then Bazaar is not the correct pick. Just because it only goes in one deck, right? And you need to get quite a lot of support.
Like I have added like Hashaton. There is something like that. We're slowly increasing the discard matters stuff in the cube. Like, yeah. So in a few iterations, I think Bazaar will go up a little bit. So 2 cards I don't think you mentioned. So I don't think Mana Confluence is a terrible pack 1 pick 1, because it is a land that taps for any color of mana. That's not terrible in this cube, and it will allow splashing. It's not as good as a fetch or a jewel or a shock, something like that, because you can't guarantee. But like taking a pack 1 pick 1, it will be in your deck, so that is at least nice. And also, I've been relatively impressed by Crystalline Crawler. If you like, the decks are slower, this comes down. It can make you like it can put it. Yes, Malevolent Rumble can take you from 2 to 4, but this can take you from 4 to 8. And that can be quite good in this cube. So yeah, so those are worth mentioning. Yeah, I think I'm train wrecking pack 1 pick 1 and doing Bazaar, but I think that's fun.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad pick in that, like, it could be the best card in your deck, right? But it's quite an all-in pick, and if you're get cut on graveyard stuff, then you'll find it tough. But I would be very tempted to take Bazaar just because it's such a unique card, is the other thing, right? Yeah. like, yeah, when we draft this cube, we're drafting to have fun, and you only get one shot at a bazaar, right? There's nothing that's a little bit like a bazaar. A bazaar is one of a kind. So I'd be pretty tempted by that.
It's we're bazaring, I think, and then we are looking to use our cogworks on maybe dredges, or maybe like ideally Tortured Existence and Insidious Roots. Basically, I think it's kind of the end goal of this line, probably. But yeah, very fun card. We love it.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, I'd be like Hogak and Roots are the two cards which are kind of unpassable to me once I've got a bazaar.
Yes, the GAC. Yes. Actual ways of winning, not just engine. That is where I am weak at, I will admit that. But nice.
Yeah. 8/8s do tend to win games.
It's got trample, James.
It sure does.
All right, let's do another one. We have as options, we have Lenoir Visionary. That's the 3-mana elf that comes in, draws a card, and taps through. We have Rapacious Guest, which is a Food Matters card. We have Wall of Omens, which is a wall that comes in and draws a card. We have Lingering Souls. That's the one that makes 2 spirit tokens with flying and has flashback. We have Audacious Swap, which is actually a polymorph effect. We have Goblin Bombardment, which is a free sack outlet and pings a player for damage. We have Warstorm Surge, which is a 6-mana enchantment that when a creature enters the battle under our control, we can deal its damage to any target. We have Blood for the Blood God, which is a rad as hell 11-mana spell that costs 1 less for each creature that died this turn. And you can, when you cast it, you discard your hand, draw 8 cards. It deals 8 damage to each opponent, and then you exile it. So that's very much for the big spelly wheel deck. We have an interesting one next. We have Sovereign's Realm. This is kind of like Wellnet that we mentioned earlier. It's a conspiracy. Your deck can't have basic land cards, and your starting hand size is 5. Exile a card from your hand. This turn, you may play basic land cards from outside the game. And basic lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. We have Diabolic Servitude, which is like a slow it's a 4-mana animate dead, but you can get Diabolic Servitude back to your hand when it goes. We have Korvold, the Jund legend we mentioned earlier. We have Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit. This is the Orzhov Frodo that goes with Sam, which is actually the really good payoff for food. We have Magmatic Channeler, which is like an impulse draw effect. Which is like a Rummager impulse effect that can become a 4/4. We have Toby, Beastie Befriender. It's a 3-mana 1/1. Then when it enters, you make a 4/4 beast. So decent in token decks and quite good with Flicker because the token you make is not legendary. And then we have Tiger, which is the Gruul OG dual land. What do you like from this pack, James? I think we should probably talk about Sovereign's Realm first of all, just because this is a card that gets better the earlier you take it, and this is the earliest that we can take it. What do you think about Sovereign's Realm, pack 1, pick 1?
It's a really cool card. I'm struggling to work out if it's good. I think it might be really good, but I could also see being wrong. My reading of this, right, is so your starting hand size is 5, sucks, obviously. You'll still have to put some. You'll play most of your spells, but that's fine because you can play any of them as lands basically at any point. The way I would be looking to draft this, so I want my curve to be fairly low. The reason being that I'm already starting down 2 cards, right? What I'm getting for that is perfect mana, and I never get flooded, and I never get screwed. So for it to give me that value back, for me to get my cards back for starting down 2 cards, I want to be able to stop playing lands before it. I really don't want to have to play my 6th land, right? Because that's just putting me down a card that I kind of don't need to be down, and I'm already short of cards. That might be kind of tough in this cube. Like, I think in a different cube, you could say, oh yeah, this is sick. I'm going to play my curve's going to stop at 3. That's going to be amazing. I don't think you can do that in this cube.
That's fair.
But you're going to try and have your stop cards certainly stop at 5, I think. I'd be really tempted to take it sort of for science, as it were, because I want to play with it and see if it's good. But I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't stake my.
So, one thing with this is you still have to get to 40 cards.
Yeah, so you're playing. It's almost like the other one where you're playing every card you draft, right? But it's in some ways that's less of a cost, right? Because the bad cards that you put in your decks are kind of just lands, right?
They're just lands, exactly. Yeah. So I think I think I would take this, and then I would still try and draft one of the archetypes, but just effectively it's perfect mana. Like ideally this and like the deck that draws me 7 cards. This with wheels.
This with the wheels is so good. Oh, I didn't even think of that. That's phenomenal. Yeah, okay, I'm pretty into Sovereign's Realm. The other thing that we should have said, right? Oh yeah, but yes, the basics have tap for any color. Yeah, it seems really like the upside seems really high. I'd want to try and take Sovereign. Yeah, I'd want to take Sovereign's Realm and draft around it. I think. The other thing to say with this card is not in this cube because these effects aren't in, but this can be incredibly broken in certain cubes because it just says exile a card from your hand. This turn you may play basic land cards from outside the game. It doesn't say you may play a basic land card from out of the game. You can play as many as you want. If you had like a fast bond in play, you could just play basic lands from outside the game for as long as you had life points. That would be kind of dope.
Yeah. It's still linked to the number of lands you can play a turn. But yeah. If you have an effect that lets you play multiple lands, then yeah, you can really get it down with Sovereign's Realm. There must be 1 or 2 effects that let you play multiple lands in this. But that would I don't know, Rampaging Balos. That seems pretty solid because when you need them to be lands, they are lands. When they're spells, they are spells. I'd be tempted by Sovereign's Realm, but not. But that's the thing. I actually don't think like a 5-color best of soup deck is going to be the best deck in this. I think you still need to have at least a little bit of synergy somewhere. Like maybe it's you're picking up like your interaction and your card draw is in every colors, but you're still kind of focusing on okay, I'm still trying to do like a bit of token making and I'm going to win that way, or I'm going to do a bit of artifact and win that way. I still think like Sovereign's Realm is not I can just take the best card. Like in Conspiracy, it was I'm taking this and I'm taking just the best card in each pack. Paying attention a bit to curve, I don't think you can do that in this. I think you still like. For me, this is a way of just guaranteeing I have perfect mana and like I can like there are multicolored again like in this pack we have Corvold, which is the Jund card that wants to be in the sacrifice deck. We also have Goblin Bombardment, Lingering Souls. Like there's a world where you just hoover up all those bits as it goes round, and you just have the most busted version of a deck because you have perfect mana. And then you pick up a couple of wheels or a couple of big draw spells to kind of refill your hand and really kind of push you over the edge.
Yeah, for sure. I think certainly, yes. So I think you're certainly right in that you shouldn't just be drafting like 5-color soup don't have a plan deck, but the fact that you don't have to care about what your colors are anymore will just fundamentally change the way you approach your draft, I think, right? Like, I don't think you're going to take Sovereign's Realm and then be like, I'm Naya tokens, because it will just fundamentally change the way your deck looks at the end because you didn't have to care about what color your spells were. But I think you're certainly right that you should still be like, you still need a plan to win the game. It won't just be, I'll take the best card out of every pack.
Is it actually Sovereign's Realm and then you do anything to get a Song of Creation, play an additional land?
Oh, Song of Creation, Sovereign's Realm is phenomenal. Oh, that's so good.
That's so much fun.
Okay. I'm taking Sovereign's Realm. It's not close, actually. I've changed. I'm committing
because it's pack one, pick one. I think you have to give it a go. But like again, if you weren't feeling it, there's a bunch of good cards in this. Like I don't think you like Lingering Souls and Going Modern would go great in the same deck, but I think you can probably wheel one of them. I think I'm probably taking like my next pick after this is probably Bombardment. I think just because it's a very flexible card that will go in any kind of Saki deck, and there's a bunch of tokens.
Yeah, and I think it's the sort of card where it's kind of a best in class in terms of. I think if you don't, a lot of the aristocrats decks, if you don't get a bombardment versus if you do, will feel very, very different. I think that would be a very reasonable pick. Diabolic Servitude, I think, is also probably very strong in this cube. That's sort of it's an animate that you can sort of reuse when the creature dies. I think it's very, very powerful. There's also just not a ton of animates in this cube, right? But there are a lot of good big things. So that seems pretty powerful. Corvold, I think, is excellent, but I would try and not take a 3-color card this early.
So in this cube, I think it's not as bad as in other cubes, but it's still not super ideal. Pack one, pick wanting a 3-color. I think we're Sovereigns roaming and we're just trying to see what happens. I think that could be fun.
For sure.
Nice. All right, should we do one more, James?
Yeah, one more sounds good.
All right, our last pack of the day. We have Otherworldly Escort, which is a 4-mana flash. When it dies, if it's not a spirit, you return it to its play under your control with 4 charge counters on it. It's a spirit detective, and you can remove a charge counter from it to destroy target creature that dealt damage to you this turn. So it's a nice little removal spell for later in the game. We have Satyr Wayfinder, the 2-mana self-mill card in green. We have Deserted Beach, which is the Azorius Slowland. We have Quintorius Cand, which is the Boros Planeswalker that ruined Standard recently. It has -3 to discover 4, and then it does some other cool stuff with if you cast spells from exile, so there's some bit of synergy there. We have Space Marine Devastator, which is another squad card, but effectively this is this destroys an artifact or enchantment. Very good card in this cube, but I think it is a bit it's not a card we're taking early. We have Steam Vents, which is the Izzet Shockland. We have Caesar Legion's Emperor, which is actually quite a messed up card. I will read this one because it's from the Fallout set. It's 1 and a Mardu for a 4/4. Whenever you attack, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, choose 2. Create 2 1/1 red and white creature tokens with haste that are tapped and attacking. You draw a card and you lose a life, or it deals damage equal to the number of creature tokens you control to target opponent. That really is a top end for the aggro deck. We have the Boros Slowland next in Sundown Pass. We have Shilgengar. We have Shilgengar, Sire of Famine. It is a 5-mana Elder Demon with doesn't really have a downside. It's just a 6/6 flyer that you can has a free sack outlet to, and you create a blood token, and then it has a triple hybrid as Orzhov activate ability to sacrifice 6 blood tokens to return each creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on them. We have Scalding Tarn, which is the Izzet Fetchland. We have Frodo again. We have Quartzwood Crasher, that is a 5-mana 6/6 Gruul Beater. We have Panharmonicon if we want to double up some ETBs. We have Cyberdrive Awakener, which is a 6-mana 4/4 flyer that gives other artifact creatures we control flying, and it also animates non-artifact creatures the turn they come in, makes them all 4/4, so it turns food and treasure into 4/4 flyers. Pretty solid. And then we have Rosy Cotton of South Lane, which is a food card that makes food, and whenever a creature token is put, whenever you create a token, put a +1 counter on target creature you control other than Rosy. So what are we feeling, James? So just raw power level from my end. Caesar is actually a very messed up magic card, but it is a 3-color card. I could see myself taking Scalding Tarn first, just because it is phenomenal to have a fetch land. It is a bit boring, but I could see Scalding Tarn Steam Vents just as a way of getting my mana in. Is it pretty set? If the Steam Vents was a different jewel, like if it was a blue-green jewel or a red-green jewel, something like that. So my Scalding Tarn got me 3 colors of mana. I think I would be more open to taking that with my Cogwork. Just because fetches are so strong in this, and they really open me up to so many decks and just having a good mana base. I think I'm Scalding Tarn, but from a raw power level point of view, I know Cyberdrive Awakener will just win more games. What are you thinking? What are you thinking from this pack, James?
Yeah, I'm on a similar stage to you. I think Cyberdrive Awakener, I think, is the most powerful of the monocolored spells here by quite a lot. that card in this sort of cube where we've spoken a lot that you can just create a lot of little artifact tokens that will just win games for turn it comes down, and getting that win condition early and building around it could be very strong. Caesar honestly is not a card I'd read before in my life, but it seems kind of messed up. Like the fact you get that trigger on any attack as well, Caesar doesn't have to attack, so you get it the turn you play it. That seems really powerful. But honestly, I would just take Scalding Tarn here. I wouldn't double up with the Cogwork, because the thing is, right, I'm not really taking Scalding Tarn as an Izzet card, right? This is a cube with triomes and jewels. I'm assuming that Scalding Tarn is going to get all three of my colors regardless of what three colors I end up playing. Obviously, I might end up playing more than three colors, and then it gets even better. To me, this is a take Scalding Tarn, be 100% open, and have a great fixer locked in. And that's the reason why I mean, I've said we recommend like taking lands out of any of the other packs, but when you're taking a fetch land, it's kind of fundamentally different because you're not committing to a color, right? Even if you take an OG Duel, that card's going to be great if you are those two colors, but you have to be those two colors. Scalding Tarn is almost certainly going to be great regardless. And I think is much better than something like Mana Confluence, because even in a slower cube, like tapping your land, like when you have to play a Mana Confluence on turn 2 and then you just take a damage every turn for the rest of the game, it's kind of like you started on 12, it's kind of rough.
Yeah. No, I do agree.
So I like the Tarn a lot here.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I do kind of want to shout is just is Panharmonicon. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to be in the Flicker deck. There's just so many good ETBs just running around this cube. This is also the type of a cube where you can spend turn 4 to play a do nothing enchantment, as long as you are then following it up afterwards with turn like 5 or 6, or turn 5 and 6, getting your value back. So you don't have to be Flicker, but you do need to have some strong ETBs in there, which isn't super hard in this cube. So I think honorable mention. Also it's colorless, so it can go in. It's in a banned shell, but again, you can be any kind of like the actual Flicker cards are more based in Azorius anyway. So kind of you can very much kind of team that up with some other cool like artifact broken stuff as well. So very solid card.
For sure. I mean, I think we spoke earlier about how the archetypes bleed into each other, and I think Flicker is very much one of those. I can very easily imagine my Mardu Aristocrats deck having enough good ETBs that I want to play Yorion, right? And then like Panharmonicon kind of feeds into that.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah. Panharmonicon, from the moment it's been printed, very cool and fun Magic card. I probably should have used this at the top, but like I think a good way to explain this cube is that Panharmonicon is good in it.
Yeah, I think I like that actually. If that's how you start building a cube, where like I'm building a cube where Panharmonicon could be good. And go from there as a solid approach.
But yeah, just a final thing before we wrap up today. One of the things I've been really happy with this is just the games we have played with this cube and the drafts we've done have been so much fun, and everyone that has played it has really enjoyed it. Another thing as well is just this type of cube is very different from like the other cubes I've built, like I like my Unpowered Vintage cube, where kind of like those slots in an Unpowered Vintage cube seem a bit more predefined, if that makes sense. Like there is an element of like the best cards go into it, they're kind of already taken. There's less flex, whereas this is effectively all flex. And the games have been great, and just also the conversations we've had afterwards. There's just been a lot of conversations of like, oh, what do you think about this card? What do you think about this card? One of the things that we're doing with this cube is also, if you win it, you just get to add a card. You can't add Mana Leak because efficient cards are too good, but as long as it's cool and interesting, you can add it. So we have had some cool cards added. We've had, Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and we've had Repurposing Bay get added. So if you win it, you get to add a card to it. James, kind of like, what's your, like it's all, me as the designer of this is a little biased to how it's kind of played and the experience of it, but kind of how have you found playing the Treat Yourself cube?
Yeah, I think it's been really fun, actually. The games feel great. Like, they're the sort of games where if you draw a hand that functions and you will have time to execute your game plan. You don't get infinite time. Like your deck, I think the decks don't have to be that quick, but they certainly have to be quite consistent. I think I've certainly run into some decks where they have really high potential to do powerful things, but a lot of draws that just don't. So I think that's going to be sort of one of the things that people get used to is like just how to increase the consistency of the decks. But I think the games have all been really, really fun. Like there's time set up. There's a lot of back and forth because often when the deck gets to do its big thing, it doesn't end the game, which I think is a good thing. Like it's not that the games never end; they don't drag on forever. But there's a lot of back and forth. Right, you still have scope to recover after your opponent has had their big turn. I think it's played great so far.
Nice. Honestly, yeah, that's really nice to hear. And yeah. Long may it continue. So as we mentioned, link to this cube will be down in the description below if you want to check it out. Also, let us know on the socials what you think of it. What would you add? Are there any changes? That kind of stuff. There is a chance that some people might get to actually draft this cube in paper. I have submitted it to Cube Clash London, which is taking place in a couple of weeks at time of recording. So if you're in the area, I'm going to be there. James will be there. James, you're looking to take down the title. You came so close last time.
Yeah, I lost in the finals last time, so see if we can go one step further.
But it was the only game of Magic you lost all day, to be fair. So
it was the only match of Magic I lost all day.
Jesus. Okay, yeah, nice. yeah. So the cubes for that haven't been finalized yet, but I have submitted it. So yeah, fingers crossed. If it gets selected, you could be drafting this cube. So this could be a little primer for you, get you ahead of the rest of the competition. Marvelous. But yeah, that's going to do it for today. James, pleasure as always. Thank you very much, man.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Nice one. All right, that's going to do it. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Give the podcast a 5-star review. Tell a friend. All that positive stuff really helps us out. Until next time, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.